Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you once again by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest was the artist of the recently concluded The Walking Dead. It's Charlie Adlard. Thanks for coming on, Charlie.
Hi, that was weird when you said, well, that's the first time anyone's said that, was the artist, past tense. I've been so used to is the artist, now it's was.
You know, it's funny, I actually, my podcast that went up last week was with Cliff Chang, who recently completed Paper Girls with Brian K. Vaughan, and yeah, and it's funny because I also said was for that, but both times it was extremely confusing. But yours is like especially confusing because you've been doing it for
forever.
Yeah. I mean, here's a crazy fact for you, Charlie. Walking Dead was one of the 3 comics that actually got me back into comics after a hiatus, like in high school, college for me. So I'm not trying to date you, but at the same time, it is like that's, I mean, it's a hell of a run.
Yes. Well, yeah, 15 plus years. I know. It's, yeah, what can I say? It is.
Well, I guess I do want to start with the question that everyone is wondering, and that is why you, Charlie Adlard, canceled The Walking Dead.
It's just me.
just you.
Yes, news. Walking Dead is cancelled. Yeah.
That's why you're on the front page of BBC.
I know. It's that big a news. Well, probably, I don't know if it would be a surprise to people, but it's literally, this has been an ending 4 years in the making.
Yeah.
About that long ago, I emailed Robert and said, you know what, I kind of need an ending to this now. You know, otherwise we can't just keep going on sort of saying, oh, this will carry on until, you know, we get bored with it, or it'll just go on forever till we're old and grey. You know, I do need an end point. I think all great series need to finish, if you sort of mean. And coincidentally, actually, Robert was feeling the same thing. You know, if anyone's read anything online, they probably have heard, you know, his reasonings for why he decided to, you know, it was the best time to finish, etc., etc. Which, like I say, perfectly coincided with my feelings on the subject. So, yeah, so really after that conversation, we started hatching plans as to how this thing was going to finish. So, and, you know, Robert obviously came back to me and said, well, we're going to finish on this issue then, because it just made numerical sense, only in the fact that obviously it works perfectly with all the trades and the collections and everything. And at the end of the day, I think most people prefer to see, you know, if you're just going on the look of things, we prefer to see, you know, 4 nice, thick compendiums and that's it, rather than 3.5 compendiums or 4.5, if you see what I mean. So that was the reasoning for finishing on 193.
Yeah.
As opposed to 200, which I think a lot of people thought we were going to finish on, you know. So yeah. And then, you know, gradually we worked out a scheme, whereas we were going to, well, as soon as Robert said to me, how about we do this in secret and not telegraph it at all? I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was a brilliant idea. I was totally on board with that because, you know, in this day and age of social media and everything is telegraphed, you know, it was just nice to have something, you know, to hold on to a secret. And I think we did pretty well holding on to the secret. It was only until that final week where things started to leak, unfortunately. But we sort of knew that was going to happen because in the last, shall we say, couple of weeks leading up to it, more and more people did have to be told. And as soon as obviously the comics was taken, you know, sent out to the retailers, you know, that was it. You know, we knew somebody at some point would, you know, give the game away. But it was still nice because obviously there was a certain, percentage of readers that would pick up that final issue and read it and then get to the end and it says the end. I'd have loved to have been there with a reader who had no idea that that was going to happen, to see their expression.
Yeah, no, it was funny because I heard that there was like a big spoiler and that like it was something that people wouldn't expect on Monday, and I was actually doing everything I possibly could to avoid that news because I had the Carl's death, not Carl, Rick's death, spoiled for me, and I was just like, I just want to avoid this because Walking Dead definitely has been a series that's been known for surprising people, and it was funny because I actually successfully avoided it until I believe the morning of, and then I'm on this like Twitter DM thread where we talk about basketball, and I went on there and somebody was like, "Can you believe The Walking Dead is ending?" I'm like, "No, of all places." But I
got so far.
I know. It'd be like if I was going into the new Star Wars movie and somebody was like, "Rey's dad is Snoke," and I'm like, "What?" As I was walking into the movie.
I know. You got so far.
Yeah, but I mean, it is that's one of the things I love the most about the ending, besides the comic itself, was, it's a book that for 193 issues spent a whole lot of time surprising the living hell out of its readers, and it was like zigging when other comics would zag, and for a long time, it got to the point where it was almost like a certain level of I wouldn't say complacency, but civilization was returning, which was the natural like bent of the story itself. But then ending it where the ending itself was a surprise, where it came out of nowhere, was kind of like a perfect last twist in a way, because it's just what you guys were all built off for forever. But it was a twist that resulted in the return of civilization, which was pretty great.
Yeah, well, one other thing I always remember saying to Robert, and obviously he agreed because that's what he wrote, was, you spend that long on something, you almost don't want it to end on a downer.
Yeah.
You've invested so much time in these characters as, well, me and Robert as creatives and you guys as readers as well. You've invested that much time that it's not even a twist in a lot of ways. The only possible solution to this whole story would be a good one, if you see what I mean. Because it'd just be the world's worst downer to sort of say, yeah, the world's screwed. Sorry, we're out of here. And it was nice. It was really nice to finish on this great positive note after all the shit that they've been through. You just wanted to, I personally, and obviously Robert as well, just wanted to give them that final send-off that worked so perfectly. And in a lot of ways, those sort of endings are the best sort of endings. I'm not saying good ending, sort of nice endings where it all ends happily ever after are the best sort of endings, but the endings that you almost expect, the endings that are right for the thing you're doing, whether it's TV, comics, or whatever. I mean, I'll cite a really obvious example to illustrate what I mean, which is Breaking Bad.
Right.
The ending of Breaking Bad was perfect. And it was right for the characters. It wasn't a big spoiler. It wasn't. You watched that end of the last. You didn't watch the last episode of the series and think, "Oh my god, that's happened! Oh my god!" It just. You knew it was going to be this overarching tragedy in the end. That's how it was always meant to be. But in a great way, and I think The Walking Dead was always meant to have, if we were given, and thankfully we were, if we were given the chance to tell the whole story, this is the only way it could have ended, and it's the perfect way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because it's, I think sometimes people want endings to be these big splashy things, but in reality, it's we were talking about Paper Girls. It's like ultimately these stories are designed to kind of, pay off your journey with the characters as much as they are like the story itself. It's like the story is a mechanic for the characters, and really it's The Walking Dead, like I said, it's funny because when I was thinking about, I wrote a piece about it, and when I was thinking about it, it kind of almost I had a nadir at the middle where it's like everything seemed the worst, and it was just like life is a living hell. Like maybe not in the middle, but post governor, like around Negan, I guess. And anyways, but then it was like after that it was all about like kind of fixing things, and it really made sense to like kind of say like this is what happens after, like you can rebuild after it, which is funny because it was like this nihilistic book for forever, and then it became like kind of a hopeful one.
Yeah. Become the most positive book in the whole industry.
Yay!
Well, it is in a lot of ways, because it just says, look, like I said before, the amount of awful stuff that we've lumped on these characters, and it's the apocalypse and etc. Yet, literally, out of this, humanity can survive, and that that's the positive message. Good finally does prevail. Which I think not to get overtly political, in today's day and age, it's quite a nice positive message to put out there. I think.
Absolutely.
There is good. Honestly, there is good.
So you reached out to Robert and you said like we need an endpoint. He was already there. He was already in that mindset too. I mean, he had the big write up in the back of the issue where he talked about that, but. It's funny because there's like sometimes when you want something and then you get it and you're like, whoa, what have I done? What have I done? Did you have any complicated emotions once it was decided?
Not when it was decided, because when we sort of decided, it was so far away.
Yeah.
Basically, Robert, we were pretty much embarking on, I remember distinctly, we're pretty much embarking on, sort of, shall we say, if you're putting it down to collections, the beginning of the fourth compendium. So in a lot of ways, I was thinking, oh God, it was nice to be given an end point, but I was still thinking, I've got to draw a whole bloody 48 issues before, For me, it was funny because I've been on it so long. 48 issues didn't seem like a lot,
right? Yeah,
I mean, to most people, that's an epic, but for me, because I've done so much previously, only 48 more issues. Oh God, that's easily achievable. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I've said this before, so it's no big secret. When I finished 192, because it was my final purely penciled issue and Stefano inking it, my feelings about that were pure elation, because it was no secret I did not enjoy being inked. And that's no disrespect to Stefano as well. But I will, I've said it loads of times in public, Stefano is the second best inker to my work, the best inker being myself. So, and Stefano knew this. He knew he knew I didn't really want to have my stuff inked. And the only reason it was being inked was because we brought him on board to when we went bi-weekly with All Out War. And then afterwards, we thought it was a good idea to keep him on because I could do other things in between then, or I'd have more time to do things in between. So it was a kind of a compromise. But don't get me wrong, Stefano has been brilliant, and he's made my work look as good as possible, as good as I could expect, but not how I would do it, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So I've got to admit, the feelings of finishing that issue were brilliant. And that was just before Christmas I finished that. So it was a great Christmas present to myself to actually finish all that. When it came to doing the final issue, and at the end of the day, it was a 72-page issue, so it was the equivalent of doing 3 issues in one. And I went back to ink to myself. Of course, I started really enjoying it again.
Yeah.
And when I did that last page, and I did, and I, put in the end at the end, it was mixed feelings. It was definitely mixed feelings all of a sudden. It is kind of weird whether you've enjoyed it or not. That regularity in your life has suddenly gone, and it's been kind of weird. That was April I finished. So, the last few months have been kind of weird, not having it in my life.
Yeah.
Not that I'd ever go back to it, but it's hard to explain. I think it's just that regular thing that you had, and now it's gone. And the weirdest thing in the world, like I said to you right at the beginning, was when you are literally the first person that said that, that the past tense thing was the artist on The Walking Dead, and you think, oh yeah, oh god, that just sounds odd. Since I've been so used to is.
But you know, the funny thing is like, a lot of anytime you have like a lot of pressure on you, it's like, oh god, it sucks in the situation, in the moment, and for your, I mean, not, it doesn't suck, but I mean, it can be overwhelming almost. And like the monthly deadline in comics is a lot, and a lot of people have a hard time hanging with it. That's one of the reasons why I'm guessing it was nice to have Stefano on you, is it would buy you time to like have a life and to turn this stuff all around. But it's funny because it's like sometimes when I'm in like a situation where I have like a lot of pressure on me for an extended period of time, it's like afterwards, it's almost like you miss the pressure. It's just like you have this like propulsion behind you because you have to get this done. And then afterwards you're like, oh wow, this feels weird. It's confusing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And someone said to me once, apparently it's a saying, I hadn't heard it before and I've never heard it since, but it's very applicable to me and how busy I was on The Walking Dead. But apparently there's a saying that goes, you know, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. And I kind of thought, yeah, it's true, because I just got so much stuff done when I was doing The Walking Dead. And I was doing other projects as well. Even when I was inking, I was doing other projects. Yeah, you seem to get in a mindset where you can just fit in so much stuff. And the one weird thing has been since I finished The Walking Dead was I kind of think, I mean, it's only a few months ago. It's not like years ago. I kind of look back on it and think, well, how did I do that? Because now, you know, the days seem to go past and I still seem to be as busy, but I just don't seem to be doing as much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other stuff seems to suddenly come out of the woodwork. It's bizarrely, you know, non-comics related stuff, just personal stuff, whatever. And you find yourself doing things, your days are full, but not necessarily full of work. And I'm just thinking, how the hell did I manage to do 22 pages a month if it was like last week when I managed to do, you know, half a cover or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I was like looking at what you have coming up, and you have, you know, we'll get into the depths with this a little bit further on, but you have like a book with Robbie Morrison of some variety. You have Vampire State Building, and then you also have a story in like the Asterisk 60th anniversary. It's like an anthology.
Yeah, well, it's not a story. I just literally did a poster. I think the BBC website were, as with all great journalism, you know, some things are slightly exaggerated or wrong. And, no, it was just all I did. I contributed because I'm a massive Asterix fan. It was one of the first ever comic books I ever read when I was young, and I still read it. I still get I still even get the books that, you know, aren't now written and drawn by Uderzo. Obviously, Goscinny died many years ago, so he's not writing it anymore. But yeah, it was. I just contributed an image to it, which was a great honour, you know, to do, because, you know, it's and it's one of the biggest challenges actually, because Asterix is such a unique vision. You do sort of go into something like that and you think, well, do I do it like how I do it, or do I just copy, you know, Uderzo's artwork? It's like drawing Peanuts or something like that. You know, you can't draw Charlie Brown any other way than Schultz draws him. Otherwise, it just doesn't look like Charlie Brown.
Right.
You know, you can draw Spider-Man in your style. It doesn't really matter. But you can't draw Asterix. You can't draw Peanuts. You can't draw Calvin and Hobbes, anything like that in another style. It just looks really weird. So in the end, I drew Asterix and Obelix as they are, you know, depicted by Uderzo in a hopefully an amusing setting.
That's really interesting, because it's like it's funny how some books, it's like they get so infused with a specific style. Like I had do you know Fraser Irving by chance?
Oh yeah.
I got him to do a commission, but I was like, because his stuff is genuinely creepy to me quite often.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder what Calvin and Hobbes would look like if he did them. And
Right.
and so I got him to do Calvin and Hobbes, and it was funny because it still had like 20% Watterson in it. And it's like you can't do Calvin and Hobbes without a little bit of Watterson, and you can't do, Asterix without a little bit of their creator in it. And it's just like, it's funny how that works. It's like it's like they're so infused with the personality of the person who created them.
Yeah, and obviously the more, for want of a better word, cartoony they become, the more caricaturized they become. It becomes obviously harder to do your version. That's why, I suppose, more, again, for want of a better word, realistic comics like superhero comics or crime comics or whatever, you can get away with basically drawing Superman differently or whatever, because people will accept a different look. And also the fact that those sort of characters don't have an auteur behind them. We're talking mostly characters like Uderzo with Asterix, or Schultz with Peanuts or whatever, Watson with Calvin and Hobbes, etc., etc. It's only one person that's ever drawn them, so it does have a specific look. So yeah, it is. I think there's a difference there. I'm quite happy to see other people's depiction of Walking Dead characters. It's almost like I'm prepared to say my look is not the Bible, shall we say, of how you should draw Rick Grimes. I'm quite happy to see somebody else draw Rick Grimes in the style that they draw him in, and I don't think it would be weird to see that. Whereas, like I say, me trying to draw Asterix in how I'd normally draw a human being would just be very odd.
Yeah, it would definitely be weird in a 60th anniversary anthology. You're like, what is happening here? Going back to The Walking Dead itself, I did want to ask about Stefano stepping out, because it's funny when I remember when I was reading the end of number 192, and it was talking about how Stefano is not going to be inking anymore, and that you were going to be inking yourself. As soon as I read that, I was like, something is up. Like, because, first off, it just felt like it was going to be a lot of work for you. I mean, Stefano had been inking you for 80 issues almost?
Or something ridiculous, a long time.
Yeah, it was at the point where it was like almost, it was getting near half the series. And it's just, I mean, that's a long time. So it's like, I'm not saying it's like, something you're going to have to get used to again, but at the same time, it's a lot. But knowing now it was the final issue, why was it important for you? I mean, did Stefano step out solely so you could ink yourself on this final issue, and so you were the single artistic voice on this final issue?
I always said I want to, ink the final issue. As soon as we agreed what issue we were going to finish on, I said to Robert, one thing I want to do is, we'll carry on with Stefano, but I want to do the final issue. It just felt like a perfect circle. Yeah, like you say, in a creative way, it just felt like I really wanted to finish off the book just being all me.
Right.
That's how it started, and I still, just as a creatively, I still look back on my inked pages as my favourite pages. Again, that's nothing to do with Stefano. I think Stefano was brilliant, but because, I'm a British artist, and we are brought up to do both disciplines, especially my generation. Perhaps this generation are a bit different, I'm not sure. And I know obviously in the States, it's a kind of a different thing where you are brought up more to be a penciler or an inker, and that's kind of how it is. So just from that pure tradition, that's how I've always seen my artwork. I've never seen my pencils as being a finished thing. So to finish off The Walking Dead as all me, as opposed to 50% me, just felt like a perfect way to finish it. And we literally told Stefano about a year before we didn't tell him the issue was finishing. We didn't tell him it was finishing. We just said that I wanted to take back control. Take back control. Oh God.
But it's I've talked to a lot of artists, and there every once in a while there's the Jeff Darrows of the world where it's like their pencils are just like incredibly thoroughly finished, very, very tight, very, very, that is what it is. But for the most part, it seems like the artists I talk to, especially today, I think that's even kind of changed in the American market, where artists really kind of like define their art in the inking phase. And it seems like that's definitely the case for you. I mean, it's not like, it's obviously it looked like it was your art in The Walking Dead, even when you weren't inking it. But at the same time, it seems really important for your work. Why is inking such an essential part of your work?
Well, because I do draw a lot in ink. My pencils, if you see they're not really pencils, I call them layouts. If you see my layouts before I ink, I literally can draw a page in a day. I can literally draw a page of pencils in half an hour,
right? And
then the rest is spent inking. I just find the analogy for me is if you're, and I studied filmmaking at art college, and the perfect analogy was when I was at art college doing filmmaking. You'd go out and you'd shoot on location or whatever, shoot the raw material, which I never really enjoyed. It was a bit of a slog. What I did enjoy was the editing, getting back and sticking it all together. And I feel penciling and inking is very similar. The penciling is the sorting everything out. It's the getting everything together. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of thinking, and it's a lot of organization. The inking is the creative bit for me. It's the kicking back. You've got all the material now. All that hard work's been done. It's just now molding it into something which will satisfy me. And that's what I love that's what I loved about editing when I was doing filmmaking at art school. And that's what I love about inking when I work on comic books is it's the bit that really relaxes me, and I just love that process. It's just where I see it all come together, and I see the finished thing, and it's just the production of that. Whereas the penciling is just the chore, is the storytelling, is just the organization of everything. Mm-hmm. That's why I love inking. But I'd never just want to be an inker either. I need that raw material, and it has to be my own raw material to work from. I don't think I'd be very good at inking somebody else's work, because I'd be probably too self-opinionated.
You're like, well, this person did this wrong. Time to fix this.
This instead,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like you have the raw materials, and that's what the pencils are, and the inking is kind of it's kind of where it all comes together. It's where it gets refined and gets finalized and everything. I don't know. I mean, I think it's funny listening to you talk about it, because this is the worst comparison in the world, and I mean this in like the least insulting way possible. But it's like you talk to somebody about those coloring books that they would do, and there's like almost like a Zen-like element to it. It's like they really enjoy what they're doing, and it seems like there's almost like a Zen element to it, where it's like you can really kick back and just kind of like it's like you lose yourself in the inking almost.
No, it's a brilliant analogy, actually, because it's 100% exactly that. It sounds weird to say kick back and relax, because it's not totally that, but yeah, it is. You get into a Zen sort of thing. Whereas, I mean, if I'm penciling, I'd say 20 or 30% of the time I listen to the radio when I'm working. Nowadays, 60 or 70% of the time I'm listening to podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I can listen to podcasts so much better when I'm inking as opposed to when I'm penciling, because I'm concentrating more. I mean, it sounds odd to say that. I'm not concentrating, but I am concentrating. But you do get in a Zen thing when you can actually do, your brain can actually do other things, like listen to something. So it's easier for me to listen to the radio, which is sort of more, I suppose, more the equivalent of white noise, when I'm penciling, and then I can listen to something like podcasts, where obviously if you're going to listen to a podcast, you kind of want to actually properly listen to a podcast rather than have it just wash over. What's the point of that? You might as well have the radio on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a good example of how my mind is set when I'm inking.
Yeah, it's almost like one is a purely active, activity. It's like you have to focus on storytelling, getting it all together, et cetera, et cetera. And the other one's kind of like sort of passive. It's like you can kind of turn your brain off and you're just like, this is nice. I like this.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's so good. That is how my brain is thinking. This is great. Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Well, so I wanted to ask about, you obviously spent a long time with the book, 15 plus years on The Walking Dead. I'm sure you're not the same person as you were then, let alone the same artist. I mean, besides the obvious, TV show related explosion and the comic becoming a massive hit, and et cetera, what are the biggest things that both changed for you and you learned over 15 years and, I think 187 issues? I think there might have been some ancillary stuff, but
something like, and things like Here's Negan.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of ancillary stuff as well. Oh God, what's changed? My eldest child was 2. I had a kid, another child. But since starting Walking Dead, he's now, my youngest is now 14. So he doesn't. That's kind of weird to think that he doesn't know a time when I wasn't drawing The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. I haven't really considered that myself. Not that he's particularly bothered about that fact, but things like that are odd. You've been through. That's I'm a man of 53 years of age now, so I started it when I was I've been about 38, something like that. That's a lot of living.
Yeah. But did you learn anything about how you like to approach your art, how you like to approach storytelling? And one of the things that really underlines is I remember when we talked first, a long time ago, you said how much it meant to you to have a project that was your own and that you would have longevity with. But at the same time, it's you drank from a fire hose for a long time. And so I'm guessing you learned a little bit. It's I'm not saying that you don't appreciate having that project, but I'm guessing maybe you don't want to work on another project for 15 years and 187 issues again. I don't know, things like that.
No, I can assure you that, I will never do another 15-year run on anything. It still stands exactly what I said about, working on creatoring stuff. All this comes from a very big ivory tower, believe you me. It's all very nice to say because of The Walking Dead's been such a major success. It's all I'm in a very lucky position to sort of sit here now and say, I'm going to do creator-owned comics for the rest of my career / life. And I will. But I'm in a very lucky position to say that. I know a lot of people would love to be able to say that, but they just obviously can't or can't afford to say something like that. Again, something that the BBC article didn't necessarily get wrong, but they sort of implied that I've been turning down major projects from Marvel left, right, and centre since I stopped The Walking Dead, and it sort of implied that I really don't. I dislike all their product, etc., etc. That's not wholly true. I turned down what they offered me was one cover which had a zombie related theme, and I was perfectly nice to the editor. I just said, the last thing I really want to be doing now is zombies, and I got the same offer from DC. I think you can guess what these projects are.
Oh yeah,
a zombie related thing at DC, another cover. So it wasn't they were offering me big story arcs or anything to do like that. And I politely declined that. I am doing something at DC, but only covers. But I will still stand by what I said. I'm not interested in doing other people's things when when I've got the opportunity to do my own stuff. And that's no insult to Marvel and DC, but I think I'd like to think most creators would be of a similar opinion. But I totally understand, the need for a page rate as well. And, I'm incredibly lucky to be in that position to be able to say that as well. So that's what's changed in the last 15 years, is the ability to now be able to say that for real, as opposed to say it hypothetically when I was, still working on The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's really when it gets down to it is like, I guess, whether you're an artist or an actor or whatever, I mean, it's funny. I've actually brought this up a number of times. Like, for some reason, this keeps coming up where it's like, I always found George Clooney to be really fascinating. I mean, I still do. He's not dead or something, but he would always, from what I understand, he would always take one role for the studios and one role for himself. So he would do, like, I don't know, Batman, like, and Robin, so he could do, obviously it's way different time, but like Michael Clayton later on, or like
Good Luck or something like that.
Exactly. So it's like he's buying himself the freedom to be able to do whatever he wants. And I mean, really, like, that's, I mean, I'm sure you appreciate all the different things that you experience with The Walking Dead, but like the freedom it's afforded you now to be able to choose those things and to be able to choose what your next steps are without having to take, zombie related projects for the rest of your life is pretty great.
Oh no, I feel incredibly lucky. I mean, if there's the one thing that, like I say, the one thing The Walking Dead has given me is the ability to be able to do that. So it's going to be an interesting, especially the next 2 or 3 years, because I think a lot of people are going to a lot of people are going to ask, whatever happened to Charlie Adlard after? Because I'll probably end up doing projects that aren't particularly popular, because obviously I won't be working on superhero comics.
Right.
And the only regret about The Walking Dead I have is it didn't cause a flood of similar books to be of its equal success. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It opened the floodgates for a load of creator-owned stuff, and a lot of it was fantastic. But aside from the odd book here and there, something like Saga did really well, or does really well, and a few others, you don't see many of them appearing in the top 100, and I find that very sad to see that we didn't cause this massive flood of popular creator-owned books. It's what else can I say? It's sad and slightly, unfortunately, indicative of the industry that everyone still seeks the safety of the man who wears underwear on the outside.
But I did think, like, you responded to this. Like, John Allison tweeted about how, he was, how enthused he was to see you actually say, what you said in the BBC interview, which is, once you've worked on your own characters, it seems like a retrograde step to be working on somebody else's characters. And like, somebody like John is a perfect example. I mean, he's had a hell of a career doing his own thing. And, and like, it's been awesome to see, but I do think it's interesting that, like, this is something like, obviously Robert has said this, like, I mean, there was the whole, like, quote unquote Kirkman manifesto that, like, was very, talked about when it happened, and is still occasionally talked about. But at the same time, it's not something that's talked about a lot, because I think that there's always, like, to a certain degree, maybe the fear of, like, losing the connection to those higher paying gigs or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I do think that you kind of articulated feelings that a lot of people have, because deep down, a lot of people would prefer, they would prefer to be telling their own stories with their own characters.
Well, I'd like to think so. It's as simple as that. I would naturally think, as a creative, you're going to be wanting to do your own thing rather than riffing off somebody else's thing. I'm to use another analogy, I play the drums in bands. I have since I was 16. But the one thing I've never done in any band is be in a covers band. I even at my, in my twilight years, I still want to do that. And I am in a band that we still do original material. And I could never understand why musicians like just local musicians would feel just happy just covering other people's songs all the time. I mean, yes, okay, again, it goes back to earning money. Some people in bands can earn a bit of extra cash, and it might be needed cash, if they're in a covers band and they play weddings, simple as. And I can totally appreciate that. But I see from a creative point of view, that must be just grim.
Yeah.
Doing that all the time. And not saying that working for Marvel and DC is grim, but I just don't understand how you could be totally satisfied with just doing that for the rest of your life, especially now, especially in today's sort of society, whatever you want to call it. 40 years ago, that was all that was available to you as a creator, comic book artist, whatever, and that generation of creators, that's all they ever did, and that's understandly all they were aware of. They weren't really aware that you could go away and perhaps create your own things, and once we were made aware of this, and what The Walking Dead, made very, was very strong in doing, was obviously showing that there is a market for doing something like this. That more people have obviously gone over to that side. I mean, God, there are people that obviously want to do Batman and Superman, and I'm completely, I'm not going to criticize them for wanting to do that if that's what they really love doing.
Yeah.
But and there's plenty of artists that are getting well paid, and they could probably afford to go away and work on creator own stuff, etc., etc. But if they choose to do that, I'm not going to criticize them for that. That's what they want to do. That's fine.
Yeah.
But personally, I wouldn't find that creatively fulfilling, doing somebody else's stuff, especially after the success of, obviously, like I say, The Walking Dead. But as I keep might be repeating myself, but it will be kind of funny because the projects I will be working on now, I'm sure will not be as popular as The Walking Dead, and they probably won't be for Marvel and DC because obviously they're not set up like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if people start going, "Oh, I haven't seen your work for ages," and you go, "Well, I've been busy."
Well, I want to actually ask about something else in the BBC interview, and I think we've talked about this in the past too, and it's related to some of the projects you're working on. I mean, you are, you're a big fan of the French comic scene. Like that's something that is, something that really appeals to you. One of the things you cited in the BBC interview is that they, writers and artists are more on equal footing there. I remember years back, you and Robert were going to do the whole album thing, and Vampire State Building, that its origins are in France, right?
Of what? Sorry, what doing
Vampire State Building?
That's a French comic book.
Probably. Oh yeah, right.
That's made. That's being published by Soleil in France, and obviously the American is an American edition of the original French version. Yeah.
So, what is it about how they approach comics that appeals to you so much? And I don't know. I mean, because it's interesting because it does seem like there's a certain amount of almost like utopian comic society going on over in France, and how they respect the art form and everything. What is it appeals to you so much about that?
Well, primarily that you've just summed it up. They respect the art form. They call it the ninth art. over there in France and Belgium. So it's respected on that level. The product tends to be of a superior quality. I'm just talking literally the physical product, because
like the albums, the books.
Yeah, because it's published in these album forms, mostly hardcover, really nice paper stock, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying we don't do it over here,
right?
But you have to do a certain type of book or a certain or request it or whatever. That's their sort of default setting back in France. The default setting for us over whether in the UK or the US is the sort of the fairly cheap floppy and I was always amazed. A couple of years ago somebody told me that, do you realize the paper stock that most comics are printed on is cheaper than newspaper stock now, newsprint stock? And it's like, bloody hell. Yeah, I presume only because it's just infinitely more popular, and newsprint stock is obviously outmoded because of what it is. But you still I almost wish, I should request comics to be printed on newspaper stock. In a lot of ways, it would be quite nice to go back to that sort of thing. But so yeah, there's that as well. Plus the fact that French comics are obviously not as obsessed with one particular genre, like we are over here, and it's obvious which one we're obsessed with. But yeah, there's a lot of science fiction in France, and that's the stuff that tends to come over, gets translated like, just the obvious stuff like Metal Hurlant and Mobius, all that kind of stuff. There's still a big market for that. If you go to, a French comic book shop or whatever, you will still see a lot of that. But next to it, there's equal, space given to, I don't know, Western drama, I don't know, anything, crime, horror. It seems to be a bit more genre-less,
right?
Which is great. So you could propose something to a French publisher, and it doesn't, if it's not of a certain genre, they're not going to reject it straight away, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's all these sort of kind of things. And if you go, for instance, the big Comic Con in the US is obviously, well, it's two really, isn't it? It's obviously either San Diego or New York Comic Cons. The reason those two exist is because Hollywood goes to it. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, there'd be little piddly things where perhaps a few thousand people go to it to read to see the comics. In France, there's a convention called Angoulême in January, and it attracts equivalent numbers to San Diego, but it's 90% French comic books, and that's it. Everything else is periphery. US comic books is periphery. Film, TV tie-ins is incredible peripheral, and you just walk around going, whoa, there's loads of people here, and it's all to do with comics. I don't think there's another festival out there. Probably, actually, no, there is. In Japan, there will be.
Right.
But apart from Japan, I don't think there's another festival of that size that's purely just for comic books. And it's just things like that in France that just make me love the industry. And as I said right at the beginning when we started chatting, Asterix was my first love. And, it's a French comic book.
Yeah.
It's just a shame it's in French. Because my French is terrible. I've got literally shelves and shelves of French comic books here, all of which I've never read.
I bet you've looked at them. I do think, I've talked to a lot of people about Angoulême, and it's like, it is interesting. Like, one of the differences from what I understand about, Angoulême and other like European, like festivals and cons and everything is like when you go as an artist, it's like there's a certain level of expectation that you'll just be doing sketches, because it's like the art part is like such a huge draw for everyone. It's not like just getting a signature and moving on or something. It's like you're expected to do like actual sketches. And I think
and it's very much the tradition and the system there is very much like an author and a book. They turn up, you buy the comic, and you draw in the comic because you bought it. So there's not much. Can you do me a commission? I'll pay you this much for this separate piece of artwork. It's you sort of sign on the booth of whatever publisher you're working with, and the fan comes with the book, and you sketch in the book because they bought the book. And I kind of like that exchange. It's more like like I say, the book industry as opposed to the comics industry. So I think a lot of American artists are a bit shocked by that when they go over, because there's no way they can do what they're used to doing at an American convention, for instance, which is just sitting there doing sketches and saying that will be $50 or whatever. The French don't really like that system.
Yeah, no, I talked to somebody who went there, and he was like, I had to have a bunch of sketches in mind already. That way, when they actually got up there, I wouldn't be like freeze when I'm trying to come up with something. I mean, it seems like that's a core part of it. But I do like that because I know you worked with Comic Salopia, and it seemed like you were almost trying to recreate the feel of Angoulême in the United Kingdom.
Well, that was my big thing. I mean, I wanted personally to create the festival as opposed to a convention, because they are two different things. Just that feeling of a whole town embracing, a certain culture, a certain medium. I mean, it's let me be clear. We're not original. There's a festival which I'd highly recommend, but it's the best one in the UK actually, up in Kendal in the Lake District in October, which does the same thing. It took the Angoulême template and it's been going strong, and it's going from strength to strength. I think it's in its 6th year this year, and again it takes over. And Kendal's smaller than my hometown of Shrewsbury, but it's a great town to stage it in because it's an arts town. It gets lots of funding for various arts projects, and it's got that reputation. So it's the perfect place to put something like that on. But so Comic Salopia was not an original idea in terms of let's do a French style convention. But again, I think there's room for two.
Yeah.
I think there's room for two festivals, especially because they were far apart, and it's brilliant. I'm definitely of the opinion of, festivals shouldn't see each other, or conventions shouldn't see each other as the enemy. They should see each other as, the more there are, the more they should help each other to be a success, because that success will bleed off onto the others as well. So, I wanted to get Julie Tate, who runs the Kendal, we call it LICAF, the Lakes International Comic Art Festival. I'll abbreviate it for the sake of saying that every single time. So we wanted to get LICAF involved, and Julie's one of these really inclusive people. So she didn't get involved for the initial one, but hopefully if we do it again, she'll get involved with the next one. Just in terms of just helping each other. So hopefully, be more of an ideas exchange, and encourage more festivals, hopefully, to exist because of that. And long live the festival. I think the festival is the way to get general public interested in comic books, as opposed to conventions which just serve the fan. That's the main difference. But unfortunately for a lot of artists, because of the festival style, and because it's more general public, it's harder to monetize as an artist or a writer, because you're just not getting the hardcore fans that you would at a convention. So I think a lot of people assume that's going to happen, but it doesn't, because a family walking around with their kids who don't know much about comics, they're not going to sort of suddenly fork out as I said, $50 for a sketch or anything like that. They might buy something for $5 or something small and go around doing stuff like that. But it's not going to be the same sort of thing. But on the other hand, this is what we want. We want to show other people that there is this industry out there. There is this medium which people are probably unaware of outside of the kind of the obvious stuff. And show people that, we're not just a one-trick pony. We're not just something for kids. Or we're not just something for, 40-plus collectors that have a lot of money and can afford to buy, loads of slab comics for obscene price. We want to embrace everybody and say, look, come on, everyone can read a comic book. Everyone, it's not a niche thing. It's not a thing for people to laugh at. There's some genuinely amazing, artistic endeavors here. It's not, so it's all these things. It's trying to embrace everything, and hopefully show people that we are the ninth art.
Yeah, I just have a couple more questions, and one I want to ask was about just like the general idea of what's next, and we know what literally what's next is. Like I said, you have the Robbie Morrison project, you have Vampire State Building, you have the piece for the Asterix 60th anniversary, but You wanted longevity before, you wanted something to call your own before, you now, you don't want to tell other people's stories. I know this is kind of hard to say because if you're going to be telling your own stories, it's like, it'll have to come to, so it's not like you can predict the future, but, what's next? Is the next thing finding something new in comics to like almost fall in love with? Like you love the medium, but finding a new way to express what you want to do in comics? Interesting question. I've always said I want to leave a legacy. I suppose you could argue I have done already with The Walking Dead, but I don't know. I tell you a good example, and someone I really admire. I've never met him, but I really admire what he's done. Is David Mazzucchelli? Oh yeah, someone who could have been. Who came off the back of the, Batman Year One. He could have worked on any DC Marvel, title. They would have all fallen over themselves to have given him as much or as little or whatever property to work on, And what does he decide to do? He decides to just go off and do his own thing, and and he comes back with. Obviously all the stuff he's done since, which has become increasingly experimental and fascinating. And you just think, God, I really admire that, because that's a guy that almost took the money, took the fame and everything, and just turned it upside down and said, no, well, this is me. This is what I want to do. And I really admire that. And that's kind of something I would probably like to do. I don't know whether I'd have the talent or the daringness to go away and do something that experimental that he's done over the years. I don't know. You could argue, when I worked with Robbie on White Death all those years ago, that was pretty experimental, I suppose, for the time. Choosing to work on grey paper and charcoal and chalk was. Quite a departure for me at the time. But I think the projects I'd like to work on, I want them to be, I suppose, because I'm not a writer. Obviously, I have to, always work as and I love the collaborative process with a writer. And it's great to be able to work with Robbie, because Robbie lives where I live now. He moved here about 5 years ago, so he's the first writer I can properly, in all my whole time of working together, I can sort of meet for coffee or whatever and just talk about this project and just keep working on it from that point of view. I just not to work on worthy stuff. I think that's a bit disingenuous to say something like that. But just to work on the stuff that means something. That's not just throwaway.
that's what I'd really like to do with the rest of my career. Whether it's popular or not, but I do kind of, I suppose you do kind of crave the acceptance of your the people that you respect, and I think that's important to me. I always find it really. I never believe it when you hear somebody when they accept an award, in whatever medium, whether it's film, television, comics, books, whatever, and it's a people's award, right?
Right.
And they always get up there and they go, "This is the one that means everything to me because this is voted by you," pointing at the audience, and you just think, you liar, because everyone wants the acceptance of their critics, The public are great, but they don't really understand what you're about half the time. And sometimes all you crave really is the acceptance of the people that you deem to be your sort of contemporaries and everything.
Yeah.
So I've just dissed my whole audience now, haven't I?
It doesn't matter.
Walking Dead readers, they've all got impeccable taste.
Well, I do want to close with one last question about The Walking Dead, because we are at that was phase. We've crossed that threshold now. So I've said was, so
yes,
that's now a thing that's happened. It's obviously something that people will bring up to you forever, probably.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, this is really tough to say, but what do you think you're going to look back most fondly on as you move forward, besides all of the incredible Lego Star Wars stuff it afforded you, of course?
Yeah, that's the only reason I kept doing it.
More and more Legos.
More Lego. Oh God. Well, that's the thing. We say was the artist of The Walking Dead. It'll be a big part of my life for at least the next. Well, for the foreseeable, for at least the next sort of 3 or 4 years, because almost finishing it has been such big news, and because the TV show's still there, because the merchandising's still out there, and I'll be signing Walking Dead comic books for the rest of my life. It'll never be out of my life, and I'll still sketch the characters when I'm at festivals and conventions and everything. It's not like I'll ever get in that mindset of like, I'm not going to do the past.
Right.
I refuse to sketch a zombie. I refuse to sketch Rick. So yeah, I've literally just come back from my local comic shop. Just did a couple of sketches of blank covers. I'm still drawing stuff on those. Oh God, I don't know. I just think. Well, we did, I mentioned the word legacy and saying I'd like to leave a legacy. And then I immediately retracted that by saying, well, I suppose The Walking Dead is a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that is it. I mean, it is just, I kind of look on it and just think, what an incredible privilege it's been to have done something like this. And for us to have had the success that we've had and feel so lucky to have had that success, but also, it's allowed us to create exactly what we wanted to create for those last 15 years. And, for the general public to come on board with us for the whole journey has been absolutely amazing, to have something like that and people to keep with us. And as they, we all know that the best sort of creations are the ones you want, that are single-minded, the ones you want to do without any compromise. As soon as you start questioning what the general public want, you're on a, you're doomed almost. It'll never be a good thing to do. So, because you don't, you can't compromise on something like that, and to have the people come along with us on our uncompromised vision has just been incredible, and I'll always be grateful to the fans out there, and I'll always give them I'll always be there for them to sign and to talk to them, and because they're the guys that put me where I am. I'm lucky to be in this position, and it's all because of them.
Yeah, I do think the funny things that I actually wrote a little bit about this, but It's funny that The Walking Dead happened when it happened, because it's almost like the book lived long enough to become, and I mean this in a very specific way, it became what Marvel and DC once were. It went from being like something that was new in a time during longevity, and you guys became an example of longevity in a time where everything was always restarting. And It's funny because, like, I mean, besides, I think, like, Spawn and maybe, like, Savage Dragon, and if like Knights of the Dinner Table is still coming out, I don't know if it is. I mean, besides those, you guys probably had the longest running comic out of anyone, and like that's a pretty amazing thing when you really think about it.
Yeah, well, I think we must hold some sort of record, at least as being the longest running creative team.
Oh yeah.
Got to be. I know I'm not the longest running artist on something, because there's something ridiculous. I mean, I know Eric Larsen's done a longer run than me on Dragon, obviously, but yeah, there are some insane runs. You know, Dave Sim on Cerebus, and I think there's some French guy that's been working on something since the 1950s or something like that. So, but yeah, it is still incredible to look back and think, God, yeah, that's it's like you say, especially in this climate where, you know, it wouldn't have been such a big deal in the 60s or 70s, but now in the noughties, yeah, we're certainly where people, yeah, you feel privileged if an artist is on a book for 12 issues, right, let alone 180. So. Yeah, it is. Well, yeah. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, that's perfect, because that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about The Walking Dead and everything else with me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, absolutely, David. No, I've really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Charlie Adlard. You can find Charlie on Twitter at Charlie Adlard, and in the recently completed The Walking Dead at Image Skybound. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all of the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at SketchComic, or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Akil Wilson, Andrew Nikovich, Nathan House, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Connor Farner, Vita Ayala, JDC, and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Phil Null, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Schipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Fiona Staples, Chris Hallren, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.